rise up, oh God, with blessings on your people.
Greetings from our youth group here at Advent, the city of Detroit, and the over 30,000 high schoolers and their leaders who went to the ELCA Youth Gathering this past July. Today, we are going to share with you a little about our trip in hopes that you will be inspired as we were and as we continue to be. On Thursday morning, our first full day, our group of 14 people, along with about 10,000 other teens and their leaders attending the gathering, put on our bright orange gathering t-shirts, the ones we're wearing today, and got on the bus at 7:15 that would take us to Hart Plaza. This was to be our Proclaim Justice Day, and we were going to go out and do service projects throughout the Detroit metro area. Hart Plaza is a beautiful plaza and park on the bank of the Detroit River where you can easily see Canada. It is also a short walk away from the Cobo Convention Center. We arrived at our scheduled time, 10:15, then waited for our buses that would take us to our service projects all over the city. Upon our arrival, the Launch A group should have been gone. However, about half of them were still there. We found out that there had been an accident on the highway that had created a delay for the buses. We passed our time in the park by listening to the popular music the DJ was playing catch with the tennis ball Mallory brought, and coloring in coloring books that I brought. Time seemed to pass quickly despite the groups leaving at a slow pace. There was a shortage of buses because the buses couldn't take groups out and come back for the next group fast enough. Despite having to wait in the hot sun for several hours, I heard no complaints. No one blamed the delays on poor planning or the unfortunate timing of a terrible accident. Then, around 2 p.m., a gathering organizer came on the microphone and announced that they had run out of the free lunches that we were being provided with due to a problem with the caterer. Even with yet another problem thrown in the way of our Proclaim Justice Day, I didn't hear any complaining. All I heard was groups talking about how quickly they could go get lunch and still make it back in time to catch their bus. No one wanted to give up on the day of helping the people of Detroit. Then, at 3 o'clock, we got another announcement that there would be no more buses. Of course, everyone was devastated. This was a big part of the trip, a part that I was really looking forward to. Not wanting to leave the city without pitching in even a little, we walked down to the waterfront boardwalk and picked up the trash that littered the grass and sidewalk. It wasn't much, but it made a difference in the city and in myself because I feel like I got to help out. Despite waiting for 5 hours for a service trip that we didn't even get to go on, I heard no complaints from the crowd of tired and disappointed teens and leaders. The blame wasn't pointed at one person. The anger of having to wake up early for no reason wasn't taken out on the organizers and the staff that did their best to solve a problem that was out of their control. I found this extremely refreshing because typically my world is filled with complaints about trivial things. My Starbucks coffee is too hot or too cold, the waiter messed up my order, or even the weather, something completely out of our control. I think the lack of complaints came from the fact that we were in Detroit to help people who have it much worse than ourselves. And how can we complain about such trivial and insignificant things while there are families in Detroit who live in the basement of a house that's top is burned out from a fire? We were there to appreciate the good things Detroit offers and to clean up the things they needed help with. Mallory and I were talking, and she shared her thoughts of the gathering, and she felt that everyone stayed positive through this tough situation. She felt that it was a sign showing us God's plan is always a surprise, an adventure, and different than what we have in mind. It always works out in the end. While we stood around dancing, singing, and enjoying the music and the beautiful weather, citizens of Detroit would walk past, and you can tell that their moods were uplifted from the light that God was reflecting through us. Some would join in and dance with us as they were walking. One elderly man walked past a couple of times to play catch with our youth group. Plus, we got to pick up trash along the beautiful river along Hart Plaza, which separates Detroit from Canada. That afternoon was a great reminder that God uses us in ways we don't even realize sometimes. Despite the troubles with the first day, the next 2 days went fairly smoothly, and the groups that were able to go were able to make a significant difference in the community. 1,847 mural boards were painted, 600 neighborhoods were affected, 319 vacant homes were boarded up, 3,200 vacant lots were cleared of debris, 1,425 backpacks were distributed to school kids, 36 urban gardens were installed, 99 picnic tables were built, and 26 dumpsters were filled. While this made a huge difference in the city of Detroit, there is still work to be done, and while we do it, we need to remember that Detroit is not a problem. Detroit has problems, and those problems can be fixed with a little help and a lot of love. Because of the support Advent and congregations all over the world gave, much was accomplished. Thank you for your support.
The following is from Julie Harrison. On Friday, our group participated in the Proclaim Story Day. During this day, we were with 800 youth and adults from the Southern Ohio Synod gathered in a huge room at the Cobo Convention Center. The day was designated Proclaim Story Day, and let me tell you, we heard some powerful stories. Pastor Lauren and Bishop Suzanne Dillahunt shared their personal faith stories. I found them to be very inspirational and a definite highlight of the day. I was especially impressed with their willingness to share such intimate personal details about their lives to such a large group of people. Their words were so eloquently spoken that I'm sure their voice touched every person in the room. It was a great day for Advent's youth as several members of our youth group took on leadership roles in the worship part of the service. Mallory did a wonderful job reading the gospel, while Morgan, Barrett, and Alicia willingly helped with distribution of Holy Communion. Finally, Julie writes, "It was awesome to meet people from congregations in the Southern Ohio Synod. Just for fun, one church even brought flexible frisbees that were thrown around the room. Hearing these stories and participating in the worship service set the tone for a very inspired and powerful gathering experience." The following is from Sophie Glitchy. She writes, "I found that one of the ways the gathering helped me grow was how it sort of forced me into a situation in which I needed skills I didn't have. I needed to be more independent. I needed to be more creative, fun, and open to others' ideas and such. The gathering experience helped me to grow as a person, not only through those specific things, but many other parts of my personality as a whole." Lastly, Sophie says, "I find that I am more open and outgoing after this trip, and I am much more willing to help others and cooperate. For me, this trip helped me clear my mind and realize I need to stop judging people, stop caring what others think of me, and start loving others the same way Jesus did. This trip helped me stop being the party pooper I once was and start being the optimistic one people can look to when things seem bad and be reminded of God's love." There was a souvenir shop with a bunch of different t-shirts that you could buy, and there was a big group of free hug shirts. And so on one of the last days, I decided to take advantage of all the people that were wearing them. And then after a while, we started to videotape them because got pretty good at it. Everyone was so loving. I mean, I'd go up to them, complete strangers, and they'd hug me back even if they had no idea what was going on, which for the most part they didn't. It made me realize I need to start loving everyone more fully, just as God does. It made me realize I have no right to judge others for what they have done, or for what they wear, or from what I've heard from my friends. It's God's job to judge, not mine. For me to go and judge others will get me nothing out of life but unhappiness. And why would I want to live like that? Why would anyone want to live like that? Why be unhappy and judgmental when you can be happy and show God's love through you as if you have a permanent free hug shirt on? Be the person when people think of you, they can think about God's love. Don't shine so that others see you. Shine so that through you, others will see Him.
This is from Michael. Personally, I don't think there was one part that was more important than the other. I believe that all the parts together made the trip what it was. Being able to spend a couple days with 30,000 other people who believe in the same faith was amazing to witness. And to also connect with one another was incredible. Another important part was the speakers. I believe that the speakers are what helped bring all of us together. They spoke about topics that we believed in, which helped us connect. Personally, the Middle Eastern speaker stood out to me the most. Having a Middle Eastern background helped me connect with him more. He basically phrased everything I believed in perfectly. Henry stated more about this man, Ronnie Abdul-Masi. Throughout the week, we had various speakers who came and talked about the different missions that they had done over the world and locally in Detroit, in the Detroit community. There was one in particular speaker that spoke out to me. Ronnie Abdul-Mahdi is pastor to one of the only Arabic-speaking Lutheran churches in the ELCA, which is located in Dearborn, Michigan. Being Arabic and Christian in a larger than normal Arabic community in America has resulted in Mr. Abdul-Mahdi experiencing several events of violence at his church. Even through this, he finds a way to stay positive to all people regardless of who they are. After hearing his stirring words, I truly realized what the mission statement of the gathering meant. This is from Elizabeth, who was not able to be here today. For me, one of my favorite and most precious moments of the Detroit trip was Friday night. At the end of the night's presentation, they had a young boy come out and sang with a gospel choir. The lights went dim and everyone turned on their phone flashlights and were waving them in the air. All the flashlights were in sync, moving back and forth. Volunteers ran in between the aisles on the floor with big balls of light that connected to make huge crosses made of light for all the stadium to see. Entire church groups linked hands and swayed along to the wonderful music, and the feeling of the Fort Field was one of peace, tranquility, and ultimate beauty. I will never forget the linking arms with my wonderful youth group peers and feeling the power of the Lord in the room. The night we sang for all lost souls, the night we sang for a better world, a world where people had the right to fresh drinking water and food, a world with color didn't matter, where sexuality didn't matter, a world where everyone felt the love of Christ together as one, because that's what it's all about. It's about loving the person next to you like Jesus did. It's about spreading love and peace to whomever needs it. In today's society, it's hard to find those crucial moments. Together, the ELCA youth group found the peace, love of Jesus in Fort Field that night. Romans 12:5 says, "So we being many are one body in Christ, and every one member belongs to all of the others."
This is from Christy Habermill. Detroit, Lions, and Tigers and Lutherans, oh my. During our preparation for the trip to Detroit, we talked and heard a lot about the depressed state of the city of Detroit, and I knew I was ready to see the worst of a city that has struggled for several years and that is fighting to stay alive. Instead, I drove into a city that was beautiful and full of life, people who did not feel that they were down and out, but maybe just set back a little. People who were happy to see 30,000 Lutherans show up and be present and care and work hard and love a city that most think is not worthy of love. I was asked several times by people, why Detroit? I always answered by saying, well, you know, they need a lot of help after the auto industry and the housing market took a tumble. What I saw in Detroit was the future of young people wanting to make a difference, the future of old people holding out hope for their beloved city, a future that is turning a bad situation into a beautiful city that will once again welcome tourists. We looked over into Windsor, Canada from Detroit and said what a beautiful city it is. I think the people of Windsor, Canada are looking over at Detroit and saying the same thing. I will go back to Detroit someday as a tourist. Before it was a place I never had any desire to visit. I will go back because I saw beauty in that city, and hope, and I want to support all of the wonderful things that the city is working towards. And I think everyone who was there for 5 days feels the same way. God bless Detroit and her people. This is from Morgan. Detroit, a city that is unsafe to live in, filled with people trying to save up enough money to get out. a dirty city with streets filled with discarded items and people who feel discarded. Detroit seemed like a city that was completely ruined with no hope of return. After being in Detroit, I realized I couldn't have been more wrong. As we were walking the streets, we had local people coming up to us, thanking us for what we were doing for their city. Instead of trying to steal our things, they greeted us with smiles and high fives. In some of the neighborhoods that aren't as nice, people have come together to fix it and make it nicer. The Heidelberg Project in this type of neighborhood reuses discarded items and makes a neighborhood full of art and purpose. The people weren't trying to leave Detroit. They loved their city. They just needed help. Instead of Detroit being the city that had lost its way, I realized it's the city where God is most present and leading Detroit to a better future. I feel blessed to have been a part of this trip to Detroit. It has helped me realize that God is always there, even when you least expect Him. Alicia Brennan commented in her thoughts about a poet who shared her talents in Ford Field, Natasha T. Miller. T. Miller first spoke on Thursday night. She spoke a poem to welcome us to Detroit, but this poem wasn't about how the city is turning around. This poem was about how, though forgotten, Detroit lived on through the spirit of its people. She said, "This is not a city trying to transition into another city. It's just Detroit. It's a complicated story with more semicolons than periods." During worship on Sunday morning, she shared another poem. "You are something bigger. You are part of something bigger. Me who lost my brother to the streets. You who lost your aunt to cancer. And you who lost your faith in the fire of your life. We have to know that all our scars create a roadmap that leads us to our own resurrection. We are never lost, just discovering new paths. We know that death is just a part of life. Suicide don't cure depression. Judgment is for the weak. And we are strong and in it, even when we are alone together." Finally, the theme of the gathering was to rise up together, and Hendry talked about that. We have to rise up together, not separately. We aren't divided by who we are and where we come from. At the end of the day, we are brothers and sisters. We are children of God. As children of God, we have a responsibility to share with the world. This responsibility is really easy to do: love one another. God's love for us is so strong, He sent His only Son to die on the cross to forgive our sins. And all we are asked to do is share this love, to give up our time to help others, to pray, to volunteer, and to be with those who need someone. We as a whole family helped families who needed us, and I think we truly rose up and glorified God. Thank you to the members of Advent for being willing to go on this journey with us and support us in it.
We're rising up together.